Welcome to another episode of From the Canopy, a podcast series dedicated to guiding you through emotional healing. In today's episode, we'll talk about the human mind and the body and how it responds to stress, trauma, and threats. So take a breath, settle in, and let's see what the view looks like today from the canopy. So let's begin by taking a look at the various levels of consciousness. At the very high level is our conscious mind, where we do all of our thinking and thoughts and planning and reasoning. Below that is a more learned automatic subconscious response, where we don't directly think through it. However, we process our emotions and a lot of the outside world through the subconscious. So it generates more of the automatic response. We do have access to the subconscious through the consciousness, through our emotions and through repetition behavior. Deeper than that is our more instinctual level, which is considered the unconscious mind. We don't have any conscious access to our unconsciousness. We typically only see that through like our dreams when that stuff surfaces up. But it's more of our impulsive, instinctual side of our minds. It's in there, it's deep in there. Our deep core memories and our core wounds are down there. So let's look at the brain a little more. There's the neocortex, which consists of the cerebrum. This is our rational and thinking brain. The diencephalon contains other elements such as the amygdala, the thalamus, etc., which is part of our limbic brain. That is our emotional and feeling brain. And the most primitive side is our reptilian brain, which contains the brainstem and the cerebellum. So in this series, we're focusing on emotions. So let's take a deeper dive into our limbic system, which is our emotional brain. The thalamus takes in sensory inputs from our eyes, our nose, our ears, our touch, and it processes them and integrates those signals into a cohesive message to the other parts of our brain. So our cognitive minds have access to it to allow us to rationally process what's coming in. We're able to see and understand and have a conscious awareness of subjective experience of our world around us. But that information is also being transferred directly to our emotional brain for further processing, for a little bit more of that automatic response. So without the thalamus, we won't have efficient processing of that stimuli. It gives us that summarized message to go with. The conscious interface, which consists of the basal ganglia and the cingulate gyrus, this is our conscious interface that integrates all those sensory inputs coming in from the thalamus and allows us to integrate that with our emotions and our cognitions and motor skills. So it gives us a conscious awareness of what's going on. And it allows us to have a conscious ability to regulate our behaviors based off of that emotional context. The amygdala, which receives signals from the thalamus, is considered like the smoke alarm. It is the alarm center that activates the fight or flight response of our bodies and allow us to detect and interpret that emotional stimuli through comparison of past experience with known threats. So, for instance, if a lion comes running out of a bush, well, we're going to attribute that bush to being a threat. Another part of our brain is the hypothalamus. This is what I call the command center. So we're able to command our body's physiological fight or flight response through the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus' primary role is to maintain homeostasis in the body, whether that's the regulation of our automatic nervous system or our hormonal system and the endocrine system. So it'll command both the automatic nervous system and command the endocrine system. So when I say maintaining homeostasis, what it's trying to maintain is our sleep cycles, our appetite, our body temperature, our breathing rate, our heart rate, etc. The hippocampus is what I call the librarian. Well, this allows us to create new memories and convert short-term memories to relevant long-term memory. So this will link our sensory information coming in to our past. So that way we can kind of compare the two together and say, yes, I've seen that before. This is a problem. So let's look at how the emotions are processed. So as I said before, the sensory inputs coming into the thalamus being sent down to the amygdala for detecting whether there is a threat or not. Once that threat is determined by the amygdala, it's going to send a signal to the hypothalamus to say, hey, get the freak out of here. The hypothalamus is going to then say, all right, nervous system, here's your neural signals, get to town, let's go. The endocrine system, it's going to send some hormonal releases to then give our body the energy it needs to actually execute that escape or fight. The cognitive processing of that stimuli, as I said earlier, goes up into the basal ganglia and cingulate. This gives us cognitive access to that stimuli. And then the memory processing, that emotional memory we receive from the amygdala goes into the hippocampus, which then, again, gives us access by the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex can access long-term memories in the hippocampus. So now let's take a deeper dive into the nervous system. Well, this funky-looking black image to the right is an actual nervous system of the human body. The human body consists of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So as part of the central nervous system, there's the brain, there's the brain stem, and there's the spinal cord, as outlined here in red. External to that, which is called the peripheral nervous system, contains both the somatic nervous system, which is all of our skeletal muscular control and sensory inputs from our skin and muscles and feedback. And then the other one is the automatic nervous system. This one is automatic control, doesn't require any conscious processing or effort. It just takes care of all of our basic functionings with all of our organs. That automatic nervous system is built upon two different subsequent nervous systems. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you can think of the sympathetic nervous system as our fight or flight reaction center. So this allows us to engage the adrenaline, runs through our body. It handles our ability to be able to respond to threats. It makes us more alert to our area around us. It gets us ready to be able to flee or fight. The rest, the parasympathetic nervous system does the entire opposite. It actually calms and rests our body. So it's what's called the rest and digest response. And there's a particular nerve I want to mention here. It's called the vagus nerve. So in some of the other subsequent videos, we're going to talk about different ways of actually activating your vagus nerve through vagal tones to be able to then kind of provide ways of calming that body and rebalancing that nervous system. So again, the sympathetic nervous system is a balance the automatic nervous system is a balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So the sympathetic is like the accelerator. It's like go, go, go. The parasympathetic one is the brakes. It's like, okay, let's slow down, let's relax. So parasympathetic calms the body after the stress. It'll regulate the heart rate, slow it back down. The breathing will start to slow, and then allows your digestion to process. And what I didn't mention earlier in the sympathetic is to be able to flee. You want all of your energy into the ability to get the hell out of that situation. So your digestive system shuts down. So when you get back to rest and digest, you're able to actually stimulate that digestive system. It also, the rest and digest response also modulates our immune system. So if we're constantly stressed out and the sympathetic nervous system is just going, you may get sick. Your immune system is going to weaken. So we want to get back into that rest and digest state so that way our immune system is able to function normally. And most importantly, especially in the series, is the emotional regulation and social bonding that really occurs through the parasympathetic nerves. I had a situation in the past where I was so wound up that someone had told me something that pretty upsetting had happened to them, and I just was already wound up through the conflict that I just didn't actually stop and say, oh my God, are you okay? So there was no ability for me to socially bond with that person in that moment. So that's just kind of, and not to mention that the fact that my emotional system, I was all emotionally dysregulated in that moment, but it just goes to show how socially we are affected. We're more focused on ourselves and survival than outward on connecting with other people. So the endocrine system, let's take a look at that and how that plays out. So let's say a threat is detected and the hypothalamus gets a signal from the amygdala to, hey, we need to respond here. So the hypothalamus will then release the CRH hormone, which then gets picked up by the pituitary gland, which then releases the ACTH hormone that then gets picked up by the adrenal glands right above the kidneys. And the adrenal gland then releases the two hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and then some other ones. But the main ones here that we're going to focus on is cortisol and adrenaline. So adrenaline prepares the body for immediate action. So it's going to increase the heart rate. It's going to increase the blood flow. It's going to get us primed and ready to fight or run like hell. And the cortisol is that energy that's in the body that it allows us to increase the blood sugar so that way our body's got the energy to actually flee and not burn out. So it's going to suppress non-essential functions, as I mentioned before. The digestive system is going to, when you're in fight or flight mode, your digestive system is going to stop. And your reproductive system is going to stop. So that's why a lot of people, when they're under a lot of stress for a prolonged period, they lose their libido. Their reproductive system is essentially, my energy is going into surviving. I'm too anxious. I'm too depressed. I'm not worried about reproducing. So, how does it then regulate? Well, the feedback loop is the hypothalamus. If it's not still getting any sensory inputs from the thalamus, but it's recognizing that there's a high cortisol level in the blood, in the body, then it's going to actually take that as a negative feedback loop to say, okay, let's stop releasing the hormonal signals. Then the body will then return to homeostasis. So this is a healthy, natural process that the body takes to balance out and allow the parasympathetic system to start taking over. So looking more at that physiological response to those emotions. So let's say, we talk about threats. Well, that threat can be external or the threat can be internal. So if it's external, it's sights, sounds, smells, or any pattern that you've recognized from a prior experience and your amygdala recognizes it as a threat. However, There can be also internal threats that's from internal rumination. You're stuck in the past. You're thinking about the past trauma. You're worrying about what's things that have already happened and you just can't escape it. Or you're worrying about the future. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to be alone forever. No one's going to like me. That can trigger an emotional response. It could also be positive. You can think positive thoughts or have positive external experiences that actually reward that. So it's able to then get a different response. So you end up getting more positive emotions. So your limbic system really doesn't know what's real or imagined. It just responds. So that's going to be a key role in keeping your emotions under wrap. And we'll get into that a little later. What if fight or flight is not an option? What if you aren't able to escape the threats? Well, let's say you're walking in the woods and you hear a ruffle. It sounds like there's a big creature walking around. Your body is going to freeze, but in a different way. There's different ways that it'll freeze. So first is you're going to pause until the threat passes. Your body's going to prepare you to fight or flight, but it's going to allow you to actually hide. It's going to shut you down as you start kind of preparing for what action to take. So you're looking for more information to be able to know what to do. You're looking for those cues. So your senses will sharpen and you'll begin scanning the environment. You then become hyperarousal. You become tense. Your breathing starts to slow and your heart rate starts to slow. So I've noticed this happen. Sometimes I'm afraid of walking in the woods alone, and I'll hear something, and all of a sudden I'm just kind of I can feel that shallow breathing, and I'm hyper alert, and I'm start scanning. It's I've experienced this many times, and obviously in social situations too. So let's say that threat becomes realized. That noise is a bear. You see the bear, you're like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here. Or I'm gonna fight the bear. So if you realize that the bear is too challenging to fight, and there's no way that you're gonna escape, there's bears all around you, the threat will then overwhelm the body. So let's say it's not a bear and it's something that's actually going to eat you. This is a really good survival mechanism for the body because, let's say you're being eaten alive. You don't want to be consciously aware that, oh my God, something's munching on me, eating me alive, and you're going through that torture. In those cases, there's a different type of freeze response. The automatic nervous system will then induce detachment and dissociation. So it's an extreme form of shutting down. The person or the victim will then dissociate from their body. And a lot of times people report complete detachment where they're external and looking down and watching themselves in this particular state. So let's look at a little bit more of human-like threats. So some social threats could be confrontations, harassment, or maybe your core needs just aren't being met. So you can either try to communicate through that and say, hey, this is what I need. I don't like being ignored. I don't like the silent treatment. Or someone's harassing you and bullying you. You can either fight back but let's say your experience is hey, every time I try to communicate my needs or I try to communicate this is bothering me, it's met with deflection, defenses, counterattacks, twisting of your words. Well, you're not going to feel safe to fight, so fighting is not an option. Well, what if you instead say, well, I'm just going to avoid the situation. I'm going to walk away. But the person persistently attacks you. They're following you around. They're yelling at you. They're shaming you. They're lawyering you. And you finally can't escape it. Well, in some cases you might even go back to the fighting and say, okay, I'm going to lash out with extreme anger. But today's day and age, anger is a socially unacceptable behavior. So it's not an option. So instead, we may just freeze. We may emotionally shut down. We may go numb. We may just lay there and do nothing. I know sometimes in the past when I'm triggered and my fear response is fear of abandonment or fear of rejection, and I'm sensing it and my nervous system's going, the person's still there lying next to me, and I just can't get myself to be present. I just will shut down and I freeze. And it's because it's overwhelming. I don't feel safe addressing my needs, and I can't avoid them. But if they weren't here, I wouldn't need to shut down. If they left, I wouldn't need to shut down. But they're here. I can't argue with them. So I numb. There's other human-like threats. Let's say it's physical threats, violence or rape. If the person can't fight back the attacker, or they can't escape it, the person's bigger than them, or they're on top of them, or they've, whatever reason, this will cause that detachment and dissociation. So we've talked about the sympathetic nervous system, and we talked about the parasympathetic nervous system and how it's supposed to automatically balance. So what if you're in a situation where you can't be in fight or flight mode, you actually have to come back down, or you're trapped in fight and flight mode and you're trying to get yourself to come down? Well, there are ways that our cognitive minds can override that sympathetic nervous system response, the fight or flight response. So if you've heard the saying, well, just breathe, take a breath, or shake it off, well, these are tied to ways of regulating that automatic nervous system. So, breathing is the only access that our cognitive minds have to the nervous system, to the automatic nervous system that we have. So, when we breathe in, we activate our sympathetic nerves. And we breathe out, we're activating our parasympathetic nerves. So take a moment and try that. Breathe in for 4 seconds and through your nose, and then breathe out for 6 or 8 seconds. So let's do this right now. So if you notice, your body may have calmed down a little bit. I know me doing this thing, I'm starting to work myself up a little bit, but that actually helped me partway through, just giving me that ability to just calm. So the other thing I want to talk about is somatic shaking. This is an actual ability to release the stored physical and emotional tension that you may be carrying in your body. It allows us to lower that stress and calms the body, and it shifts the nervous system from that fight or flight, rest and digest response and releasing all of that cortisol and adrenaline that's just built up in the muscles. So I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but essentially what you're doing is you're just kind of like working it through. And you can imagine that when if our fight or flight response is from a physical threat, if we're running, and we're almost able to like release that in that process. But if we're just emotionally getting worked up and we're sitting still, it's difficult to release that emotion. So you could do some work and just kind of like, start shaking different parts of your body and just like, almost like if there's like water on you, you're like shaking it off like you're a dog or something. So I'm going to show you a video of an impala that just got attacked and is about ready to escape it. And you're going to see how the impala recovers and it actually shakes off that all that cortisol built up in it. So it's going to go through its own somatic shaking. So now that the threat is gone, you're going to see the impala slowly regain its breathing. And now the parasympathetic's kicking in, starting to balance out, calm itself down, and the consciousness starts to return. Now what you're seeing is the impala is actually shaking off all of that stored up tension, all that stress that's contained all within its body. It allows it to release it. All right, let's now take a look at what happens when your nervous system becomes dysregulated. So what that means is the nervous system's inability to return itself to a balanced state after its stress response. So typically this will show up, this can be short-term, but it can also be prolonged dysregulation. So the symptoms you may find are somatic symptoms with your muscles, disruption in your sleep pattern, you get headaches, muscle aches, you may even have digestive issues. Prolonged nervous system dysregulation can cause emotional dysregulation and chronic anxiety. You'll have difficulties focusing, planning, storing, and accessing memory. So typically this happens after a stress response or something tragic, like some sort of trauma. So those causes could be coming from developmental trauma, relational trauma, shock trauma, which is like acute, violent, near-death experience, chronic stress. If you've got a stressful job and you're constantly on a stress response, your body then gets used to it and it starts becoming the norm. Let's say you're trapped in a toxic long-term relationship and your partner is just you're constantly in fear, constantly on edge, walking on eggshells. Let's say you drink a lot of caffeine. That caffeine has the ability to trigger your sympathetic nervous system. Other social issues, social rejection, interpersonal conflicts, and difficult family dynamics. So I know with me, mine is a lot of, interpersonal conflicts. If I go through a period of just like upsetting people one after another and feeling like I own it, my own nervous system gets dysregulated. Social rejections, breakups, losing friends. So the body learns to respond. It learns to survive. So the brain will eventually, through repetition and those repeated negative emotions, it's going to rewire the brain to survive the constant or highly likely threat. So survival becomes the norm for the body. So I think the saying is, neurons that fire together, wire together. So for you to reverse this, you're going to have to essentially counteract those negative experiences by having positive experiences. Some of the struggles socially is when you can't rely on the outside world to give you those positive experiences. It then becomes harder to get out of your stuck ways. So that's some of the stuff we'll talk about in some of the other episodes with providing yourself with those needs, providing yourself with that safety. So going back, if the body has learned that survival mechanism, you're essentially trapping your body in a persistent stress response. And this is where a lot of the disorders will come from. So again, the symptoms, you become highly alert, you startle easy, You become hypervigilant. You're looking for threats. If you've got history of being cheated on, you're constantly scanning your environment or your relationships. Are like, that's, it's going to happen. Someday they're gonna leave me, or oh my God, who's this person they're talking to? What are they doing? You become very reactive and very unstable. Your body has learned that relationships are unsafe. Chronic fatigue. It's usually, these are all like, you see this with with depression, etc. So you develop anxiety disorders. Sometimes you'll see people with PTSD. ADHD is potentially one that's a symptom of that. So if you're constantly hypervigilant and you're scanning the environment, you're unable to focus on what you have to in front of you. And I believe I mentioned this before, immune system disorders can also be something that shows up. So you can think of this as you're essentially riding the pedals. Your feet are constantly on the accelerator and the brakes at the same time, and you can't find that balance, or you're activating it simultaneously. So depression is essentially a burnout of the prolonged stress. I recognize it when it hits me. I'm stressed out, I get anxious, then prolonged anxiety causes depression. Prolonged depression causes ideations or hopelessness. So I'm going to talk through a depression cycle just to kind of help solidify really, what that means when you're burnt out. So your nervous system can start off balanced, but then you get stressed. And if you're not able to relieve that stress, and you're constantly under stress, you're going to eventually get some anxiety. And if you can't escape that constant fear, it's going to develop into other emotions, which will then cause depression and that hopelessness. So for me, if I have unmet social needs, I'm not able to make human connection, I'm trying, and no matter how hard I try, I just can't connect deeply with people, well, then I start ruminating. I start fearing the future, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be alone forever. I'm going to constantly piss people off. There's something wrong with me. Then all those thoughts just get trapped. I get stuck in those cycles of just thinking. I then cause a dysregulated nervous system. That nervous system gets trapped in there for, for some time, let's just say like a week or two usually. And then ultimately I overload that nervous system. I burn out. I'm just like exhausted from all of this fear, all of the stress, and I just hit depression. And so when that hits, it's usually for like maybe a couple of days, a week, and the worst case, 2 weeks. I've looked into whether it's bipolar or something else, and it's not. It's just straight up depression, and it's burnout. I've come to recognize when it's happening, and I know ways of keeping it from perpetuating. So, how I get myself out of that is I then distract myself. I gotta preoccupy the mind. Get out of those thoughts, so I find something to do. I build a sugar house. I build a shed. I read something. I find something to learn about. Oh my God, it's like I've got so many freaking hobbies from all these distractions. Welcome to this. This is one of them. Okay? And so essentially what I do is I avoid that core need. I need human connection, but I'm not getting it, so I'm just going to avoid trying to get it. And I'm going to find other things to do. I'm going to keep myself distracted, but then prolonged periods of not getting my needs met, I then become emotionally exhausted and start that path of the unmet social needs of rumination and fear in the future. And what typically happens around the winter time, a lot of people get hit by this. Seasonal affective disorder. It's harder. You're not getting a lot of the vitamin D from the sun. It's darker days, you're more isolated, you're trapped inside. Your ability to get that unmet social need met and ruminating on when your childhood, when you had a family, you start, at least I would start, that period of prolonged isolation and getting those self-perpetuating fears of hopelessness. And it typically lasts much longer, lasts through most of the winter. I can come in and out of it, but the depths of it, but for the most part, it starts building. January comes, end of January, February, historically speaking, end of January, early February is when it really hits me the worst. So part of that distraction I've created for myself is maple sugaring. So that's allowed me to stop that rumination process and give me something to focus on, something to distract me with. And usually February, I'll be able to at least recover February for that. And sometimes the planning and leading up to the sugar season helped me to kind of escape that. So I really was able to kind of keep it short. So anyways, that's just an example of the depression cycle, burning out, kind of tying it into a little bit into the nervous system stuff. All right, the next thing I want to introduce us to is the CBT triangle. In subsequent episodes, I'm going to get more in depth about the cognitive behavioral therapy. But for now, I think it's pretty important to at least introduce it here as it ties into our emotional regulation process. So, I've mentioned before external or internal stimulation. So let's say we first look at internally, our thoughts and our beliefs. Our thoughts and beliefs drive our emotions, and our emotional response will drive our behaviors, and our behavioral response will reinforce or contradict our beliefs and thoughts. Externally, we could have an external trigger that could feed into our beliefs and thoughts that either triggering us in such a way that causes us to get into these emotional responses and reacting to it behaviorally, which will then exacerbate the external situation, feeding back to further emotional responses. So let's take a look at a negative thought and belief. So let's say we believe that we don't deserve love. If we get trapped in this thought process and keep saying it to ourselves, we're going to cause sadness. That sadness may cause us to then withdraw or isolate. That isolation will reinforce that belief system, causing a negative spiral downwards. We can look at that also with an external situation. Somebody says something that shames you, and if you have a shame wound, that might trigger a thought spiral, the negative thoughts, or let's just say the external situation is you have been rejected by a friend or a lover, and you then take that and say, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm never going to find somebody. I'm going to be alone. There's something wrong with me. You'll then possibly develop fear for the future and be saddened over it. And that response may cause you to behave a particular way. And you may lash back out at the person. You may attack them. Or let's stick with a different situation. Consider an external response where somebody insults you. It reinforces a negative belief that you already have about yourself. And you develop this sadness over it, or this potential fear, you then either react to them and defend it, counterattack, or whatever, you're going to exacerbate that situation. But if instead we actually take a look at our thoughts, somebody triggers us externally, and we can reframe it and we can say, well, what they said is their belief, but I don't believe it. I can choose cognitively to reframe my thoughts and beliefs about the situation. Or if I'm not able to reframe my thoughts, by the time it gets to the emotions, I can work on the emotional regulation side of things. I can work on calming my nervous system. I can do those breaths. I can shake it off. But let's say we aren't able to regulate that and it gets to our behaviors. We could, instead of reacting negatively to the situation, we can react positively. We could, instead of withdrawing, we could say, I'm still going to go out and do this. I'm still going to go out on dates. Even though this person rejected me, that's okay. I'm still a good person. I'm saddened by the loss, but I'm still going to go out. I'm not going to withdraw. I'm still going to go out and meet people. That could open you up for a positive experience going out with someone else. That then contradicts that early negative belief that you may have had. So you see, if you pay attention to this, you can actually see how you can self-regulate and control yourself. So I hope that what you got from this was beneficial for you. To actually see and understand how the mind processes, takes the inputs, stores that memory not only in your mind, but in your body, and hoping that you can also take away the experience of being able to regulate from that, to be able to calm your nervous system, control your behaviors. And yes, the disturbance may be so great that it's hard to cognitively control it. In some of the other episodes, we're going to get into dialectical behavioral therapy, which has ways of actually stopping those crisis modes where you increase your tolerance for disturbances. So stay tuned, stick around, and I hope you come back for more videos because there's a lot of good stuff coming.